Just down the road from my home in County Durham, something very marvellous is beginning to happen close to the mouth of the River Tees. Well, it may not look much now, but it is the heart of something very big. It's a test site for the creation of a reed swamp. And you see, it's worked. The reeds and the other plants are growing well. And one day it's going to be the heart of a 3,000 hectare nature reserve. It's a really wonderful place, but just look at it. I'm in the centre of what is one of the most complex chemical industrial sites in the whole world. Just over there's an atomic power station and a major industrial port. And now at last we've come to our senses, we're beginning to put the whole of industrial Teesside back into working order. A home for industry and all the wonderful birds that use this as a lifeboat as they journey across a very troubled world. And of course, one of my favourites, the Arctic tern, which has been migrating clean across the world to New Zealand and beyond since long before Captain Cook was born, just over there on the other side of the estuary. But when Captain Cook set sail from England, little did he know of the problems that the Industrial Revolution was about to cause in his homeland. Or the problems he was taking with him to places like New Zealand. No, I'm not working in passage to the South Pacific, but I am scrubbing my boots with disinfectant. You see, the place I'm going to is so special, I've got to make sure there's no spores or seeds left on for me to carry ashore. I'm going to the Snares Islands, 350 hectares of land, and yet on those islands, more seabirds nest than around the whole coast of Britain and Ireland put together. The Snares are 200 kilometres south of the South Island of New Zealand. And they're so off the beaten track that no humans have ever settled here. That means that they are one of the most special places in the whole world, a lifeboat of survival for some of the original crew of Noah's Ark. It's almost as if I'm going to be the first person to ever set foot on this shore. The giant ball kelp is my welcome mat, although not all the locals are so friendly. The most obvious of the locals are the Snares crested penguins, which occur nowhere else on Earth. I tagged along behind as part of the continuous stream of parents bringing home the catch from their latest fishing spree. We bow and sway, acknowledging an equally continuous stream of empties heading back in the other direction. The penguins are on their way to and from their chicks. And while some are being fed, courtship and display ensures that their work will never be done. It's creche time and the Parents and Teachers Association are here on guard, but most of the mums and dads are out at sea feeding. So that's a pattern of life on the Snares, a continuous movement of adult penguins backwards and forwards off to sea and then back to feed their young in the creches. And around Mozart, 13 out of the world total of 17 types of penguin feed, live, lay their eggs and raise their young. Well-worn penguin waddleways lead to a forest which is made up of only two sorts of shrubs. Both, believe it or not, are giant daisies. And the odd sea lion standing guard over what is one of the most important seabird sanctuaries in the world. "7 million mutton birds coming into land." Just like the rush hour in New York or London, but of course they know where they're going and they know why they're doing it. The dusk hour brings millions of mutton birds or sooty shearwaters back from the sea to their burrows on the land. And this is without doubt one of the greatest wildlife spectacles I will ever see. But on some islands closer to the mainland, the exciting spectacle of the mutton bird's return is a signal for a rather grim harvest. Every year, Maori families travel to the Mutton Bird Island to gather their traditional food. The downy chicks, well fed on the riches of the Southern Ocean, some heavier than their parent, are pulled from the burrows and quickly dispatched. In the past, this annual cull meant survival for the southern Maori. But today, regulation of the cull ensures survival of the mutton birds. Back on the Snares, all is peace, but not very quiet. In the early morning, it's the rush hour all over again, as the parents that have been relieved of nest duty stream from their burrows. And by the time they reach the take-off points on the cliffs, they form a mighty river of feathers. The sooty shearwaters and penguins spend their days feeding in the great southern ocean, as yet not overexploited and polluted by people. If only the same could be said for the main decks of Noah's Ark. This is the Fiordland National Park, one of the largest blocks of temperate rainforest left on Earth, and it looks just how it did when Captain Cook anchored in Dusky Bay. But if you go down into these woods today, you're in for a big surprise. Hello, imagine I'm a tiny tree seedling growing down on the forest floor. It really is a smashing place. Plenty of shelter from the wind by all the bigger trees round about, and a nice pool of light coming down, getting me going. And there's nothing in this bit of forest to, eat us. And my friend Lance would ably demonstrate, actually. If he'd had his top chewed off, he'd already be branching away, so they're the perfect spot. But we're all in a race together, and the goal is that hole in the canopy way up there. So, ready, steady, wait a minute, whoa! All the growth hormones are rising. Wait, I'll pull my trunks up. And there, 20 years on. There aren't many of us left, just me and my friend Mapu round here. All the rest have dropped out. There just wasn't enough light to keep them growing. And the race isn't over yet. We've still a long way to go, and only one of us is going to win. So, well done, me old mate. May the best broadleaf get there. And that was the way all the trees grew in the forest which covered Noah's Ark until around 150 years ago, when the Europeans introduced their browsers. Today, the only place we can see multi-storey forest growing in its own natural way are on a few offshore islands and inside exclosures like this, erected to keep the browsers out. Each exclosure is not much bigger than a tennis court. The browsers took the rest of the main decks of Noah's Ark, game, set and match. The result of an encounter of a very one-sided kind. Deer were the main forest strippers. They were introduced to New Zealand as game animals for the hunters to shoot. But like so many of the invaders, they liked the deer so much that they became very numerous, and soon the forest started to suffer. Something dramatic had to be done, because remember, 70% of New Zealand's forest had already been felled and burned. But then, help came from above. Helicopter gunships joined in the battle to save the forest. But instead of bullets, they used nets. For deer had become very valuable prisoners of war. The captured animals were taken from the forest and locked up safely behind wires. deer farms sprang up across the country as the price of venison soared. The antlers were exported to the east. Their velvet prized both as a medicine and an aphrodisiac. With few deer left in the wild, the forest began to breathe a sigh of relief and to live again. But not for long. With deer farming in full swing, it's no longer economic to remove the wild ones from the hills, and so once again the forest regeneration is under great threat. And to make things even worse, at the top of the trees there's another browser doing its best to cut even the parents down to size. Cute they may look, but ever since the ancestors of this one were introduced to New Zealand, they've been slow but surely chewing their way through the best of New Zealand's forest. Possums are marsupials, and they were brought to Mozart from Australia as the basis for a thriving fur industry. Now, if you're asking how such a cuddly marsupial could destroy the ancient forests of Mozart, well, that's exactly what the scientists had to find out. Now, the first thing I found out is that possums are better climbers than botanists. When eventually I got to the top, I also discovered that possums know a lot about the local plants. The only thing up here in the treetops today with me are the cicadas. The possums are all asleep because they're nocturnal. But as soon as night comes, they'll be out taking their pick from this great gourmet banquet of vegetarian dishes. And the first thing they'll home in, because, you know, just like us human beings, they're always going to have the largest helping of the thing they like most, mistletoe. But I'm afraid that's off. You see, they've eaten it all up already. So the next thing on their menu, the five-finger. And then they came to the main course, and what a main course! The northern rata, one of the largest trees in the forest, and with one of the hardest woods. Now, who would have ever thought that little possums could really damage and kill giants like that? But the scientists had to sit up here and watch it as one rata after another was browsed until killed off. And then, of course, the possums had to eat their way down through the menu. After this, the gourmet menu didn't look quite so gourmet. In fact, the possums were down to survival rations, plants that they'd have turned their noses up at in the past. But, you know, when you get hungry, it's surprising you'll eat anything. With reports coming in from all around that there were now more possums in New Zealand than there are sheep, the scientists really began to worry. I mean, where would this insatiable appetite of the possums for the vegetation of New Zealand come to an end? Answers just had to be found before it was too late. So the whole armoury of modern ecological research was aimed at the problem. A radio transmitter is fitted to a baby possum before it is returned to its tranquilised mum on the edge of the bush. Off they go, baby and walk mum, sending back vital information to map their rate of spread across the countryside. And the message was not good. The possums are coming. No part of the country is safe. I'd come to the last frontier of New Zealand, the very prow of Noah's Ark, and the last part of the mainland to feel the bite of the possum teeth. And I haven't come here to look at the blue Pacific, wonderful as it is, but at this rather strange red soil and the plants which grow thereon. Now, the special rock is called serpentine. It's bung full of all sorts of minerals in very high concentration, including things like manganese, which most plants and animals don't really like. And as it weathers, it turns into this rather strange deep red soil. And there on some of the nodules you can see the metals actually glinting on the surface. Now that makes problems for all the local plants. Look here, manuka. Now I've seen that growing all over New Zealand, but here's a real scruffy little thing. It really can't get going. But there's other plants around here that are found nowhere else in the world. Excuse me while I hang about. This is a very exciting place for botanists to be. All the plants have strange growth happening. This is a caposma. Now, they usually sort of great sticky up bushes, but here it's growing almost like a liana, clinging on to the rocks. And the fascinating thing is that scientists have taken this plant away and grown it in really good soil, and it still maintains this low serpentine profile. And just think, this is the only place in the whole world that this plant grows. Plants and botanists must stick together. Safe at the moment on their cliffs, these specialised plants can cope with a lot of things, but not with teeth. And the possum army isn't very far away. Yes, all the treasures of Noah's Ark could be destroyed. And those treasures include not just the forest, but also the farmland. So whether you like it or not, on Noah's Ark, there's only one good possum, and that's a dead one. How are they all going to be killed? Traps? Guns? An introduced predator? A lethal disease? Or chemical warfare raining down from the skies? Now, none of us are going to like the answer. Who's going to make the decision and who's going to foot the bill anyway? And if they get it wrong, the bill's going to be even greater. Catastrophes cost a lot of money. The possums must go. Back in the 1920s, mistakes were made in trying to control the most famous invader of them all, the rabbit. Anything went. They were killed by their millions because they were eating the farmers out of house and home. Then someone had the bright idea of introducing the mustelid gang. Ferrets, stoats and weasels, rabbit predators supreme all the way from Europe. Unfortunately, no one had told them that they'd been brought to New Zealand just to eat rabbits, and so they quickly turned their beady little eyes on the special residents of Noah's Ark, the birds. Which leads me on to perhaps the saddest story of all. The yellow-eyed penguin lives on the coast of South Island. Every day it heads out to sea to feed, and then it returns to its nest. Today they have to run the gauntlet not only of the local sheep and cows, but also of that mustelid gang. And this has been the reason for the downfall of the yellow-eyed penguin. The yellow-eyed is the most private penguin in the world. It's so modest that it can't court or mate successfully if there's another penguin within sight. Now, they used to nest here in the privacy of the forest, but since the forest has been destroyed, things have changed dramatically, as scientist John Darby explained from the privacy of his hide. It's a smashing view, John, but why did you put it just here?
We built it here, or when we built it here, there was 45 pairs of penguins lived just here.
So you can see, looking out all the windows?
We could see all around the windows here, and we could see these birds as they landed each day.
And is that one just coming in?
Yes, that's one coming through there. Yes, it's an adult bird.
Now, we can't tell whether it's he or she, but where's it going?
It's going to go up this long slope, through up into these small patches of vegetation that are left on the tops of the hills. But many of these birds are having to travel up to 1.5 kilometres inland to find shelter. Now, leastways over the last few years, we've been able to help them by planting flax, native flax, much closer to the shore.
Well, that certainly wasn't easy, and this is the private life of the world's most private penguin. But why does it need all this shelter?
It needs it because this is the nearest thing that it has to a forest habitat that now remains. A penguin on land needs a very cool place to live in, very cool and out of direct sunlight.
And here it can get very hot in the summer, and this is absolutely essential.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. In fact, we're talking about 28, 30 degrees sometimes here in the summer.
But other penguin problems are not so easily solved. Every day, excited and proud parents come back from the sea and make their way up to the nest, only to find that their chicks have gone, eaten alive by the ferrets. If something isn't done, and soon, Noah's Ark is going to lose another member of her crew. Extinction is sadly no recent phenomenon. Way back in the 1890s, it was realised that the mothership was sinking. It appeared that there was no choice. If the special birds, insects and reptiles of Noah's Ark were going to survive, the only hope was take to the lifeboats. And the first was floated in Fiordland National Park. A ranger called Richard Henry spent 6 years of his life moving birds like kakapo and kiwi onto Resolution Island in the middle of Dusky Fjord. It was the right idea, but unfortunately he'd chosen the wrong lifeboat. Imagine how he felt when he discovered that stoats had swum the narrow gap and devastated the island lifeboat of his choice. To the lifeboats became the cry of conservation as the horizon was scanned for other islands. But most were already occupied by the invaders. The list of these unwanted passengers was so long that it wasn't going to be an easy voyage. The ancient volcano of Little Barrier Island is almost 20 kilometres off the coast and so appeared absolutely ideal. No ship's rats, no deer, no possums, no mustelids. Perfect. Except for cats, sadly introduced in the 1870s. Although many thought it impossible, an attempt was made to eradicate the cats. Nearly 70 kilometres of track were cut through the bush and traps were set. It took a long time to catch the cats, and as the conservation officers and volunteers set out every morning, it wasn't uncommon to find 30 or even 40 dead and partly eaten birds along any of the tracks. And so the campaign took on a new sense of urgency until the day they knew there was only one cat left on the island. Jubilation! It had been a long and arduous job, and killing things is not the favourite pastime of any conservationist I know. At last, Little Barrier was cat-free, a lifeboat fit for even the most delicate songster. Now, the other reason the birds do so well here is this multi-layered forest, just like the stuff I saw back in the deer exposure down in Fiordland. And every one of these layers provides something special in the way of food or habitat for the local birds. And I tell you, if I was a deer or a possum, I'd have a wonderful time out here because it's a triple-decker salad sandwich and everything is good to eat. But thank goodness, deer and possums never got to Little Barrier. This is Rhabda thamnus, and it's very nice to see it in full flower because thanks to the attention of possums and deer back on the mainland, it's very, very rare. Now, as far as birds like all bellbirds and the tuis, it's below their dignity, a low-octane plant. But as far as the little stitchbirds are concerned, it's absolutely essential. If plants like this disappear, so do the stitchbirds. Little Barrier will remain a lifeboat for as long as the invaders are kept away. Now, the job of looking after this paradise falls on the shoulders of Ranger Alex Dobbins and his wife Mike. Back home. But you know, you two have got an awful lot of responsibility on your shoulders. What's your greatest worry?
Well, the greatest worry here would be either accidental invasion of rats or possibly fire, both caused by people landing illegally. Shipwreck, of course, is always a worry with rats. First thing we'd have to do would be to lay poison, run it all along the beach directly in front of where the ship has come ashore. And from then just monitor it and keep putting poison down, keep the fingers crossed. There's not much else you can do.
They're not pet parrots, but wild kaka that fly in from the forest to share the delights of this precious lifeboat with Alex and Mike. Something we could all enjoy back on the mainland if only we hadn't. But of course, we did introduce rats. Rats are among the most dangerous and successful mammals on Earth. They can eat almost anything and live almost anywhere. When rats reached the islands of Noah's Ark, they had no predators and plenty of food, particularly the eggs and young of New Zealand's birds. But recently, this wily, resourceful and long-established invader has been defeated, and it happened on an island lifeboat called Breaksea. This steep, rugged island was to be the first place where complete rat eradication would be tried on a large scale. Tracks were cut and poison bait stations were laid out on a grid across the island. Each station was represented by a pin on the map. When baits were no longer taken, the pin was removed. The final check was an apple next to the station. When it stayed uneaten, all the rats were dead. In only 20 days, the poison had done its work. And now, rare birds, insects and reptiles could come aboard another island of survival. If only Richard Henry could have lived to see the day. 700 kilometres north is Canopy Island. Here the struggle to recreate and refit the lifeboat was going to take a lot longer. It was a paradise for possums who were busily chewing their way through 4 tons of leaves every night. The island was targeted grid fashion by a team of trappers and their dogs. 6 years and 22,500 possums later, they claimed victory on Canopy Island. And didn't they do well? As Ranger Peter Daniel showed me, things were definitely on the up and up. Here, Peter, what are these things sticking out the trunk?
That's the flowering stem of a kohi kohi. If you look up high, you'll actually see the fruit. That won't actually be ripe until about June. When the possums were in high numbers here, there were no flowers or fruit here at all. We even had a scientist come over to check out to see if he could find any. Absolutely nothing. So a major food source denied the birds.
Everywhere we looked, the trees were flowering and fruiting again. The birds were happy, pigeons with full tummies, and the whole forest was alive and regenerating once more. There seems to be a lot more weckers around here. Why is that?
Probably the deep leaf litter that we've got now. Up to 5 or 6 years ago, we just didn't have litter like this. Possums were eating most of the leaves off the trees, and consequently we were not getting the litter. So birds such as the kiwi, the wecker, the robin, the little spotted kiwi are all benefiting from the extra leaf litter, which is providing more invertebrate life.
And when the possums were here, there wasn't much litter.
No, not nearly as much as this. No, they were eating vast quantities of leaves.
An unexpected benefit.
It is, isn't it? Two good examples here, David, of the courtier vine. That's the native passion fruit growing on northern rata. It's one of our tallest trees. Just appearing from the mainland forest, grows up to about 140 feet tall.
The main masts of Capity are once more in good order, decked all over with flowers, proving that the possums have gone and that one of Noah's Ark's most important lifeboats has been launched into a greener future. Mark my words, each one of these is a world first. Good news in a worldwide struggle for survival, and none more important than the story of the Chatham Island black robin, once said to be the rarest bird in the world. A few years ago, there were only 5 birds left, prisoners on their tiny island. Only one was a breeding female, her name Old Blue. Again, predators and the destruction of their forest home had brought about the species' downfall. But then, help arrived in the form of Don Merton of the Department of Conservation and some very able foster parents, the closely related tomtit. Old Blue did her very best, clutching at survival. Each time they removed her eggs, she laid some more. The foster parents did their best too. And now the black robin population stands at more than 100. Don Merton and his team saved the world's rarest bird. Hip, hip, hooray! And now, the bravest step of all. To reconstruct a lifeboat, and a lifeboat close to Auckland City. So that ordinary visitors, and not just camera crews and privileged scientists, can have the pleasure of coming here and hearing bird song just as it was before Captain Cook arrived. We're heading for the island of Tiri Martangi, on a mission which up until a few years ago would have been thought absolutely impossible. In the last 5 years, groups like ours have helped plant 50,000 trees, all of them grown from seed or cuttings taken from nearby islands. And within another 5 years, Tiri's replanting should be complete. Right, I think that's deep enough. What are we planting this time?
Cabbage tree.
Now, yeah, I first saw cabbage trees. They grow in seaside places. People love planting them in Britain, but they must be put close to the sea in Britain because of the frost. They don't like frost at all. So, and of course, you've got some very special cabbage trees, because this is where they all came from. And I think this was probably the first New Zealand plant I ever actually saw as a budding botanist, going at Brighton near London, right beside the sea. Tiri Martangi is being changed from a desert island, a desert of dry grass, into a living forest which can support all the birds that once lived hereabouts. A good example of the saddleback, one of the wattlebirds, a real old-timer of the Ark. If it wasn't for rats, they'd be in everyone's garden back on the mainland. But now they must live out their lives on these rat-free lifeboats. The news is spreading fast, and nowhere is there better news than from the poor Knights Islands. A submarine lifeboat which promises richer days ahead, not only for the fish, but also for the fisheries of New Zealand. These waters are a marine reserve, where you only take photographs and you leave only ripples. thanks to this protection, there's a greater variety of fishes to be seen here on one dive than anywhere else in New Zealand. The fish know where it's safe and they stay put in what had come to be known as the Island of Friendly Fishes. So it's the ideal place to come and study the behaviour of the locals. And how about this? It's the sand dagger's parrotfish. Now this brilliantly coloured fish is a male and he's leader of perhaps 20 or 30 lighter coloured females. Now, if the male of the harem dies or is taken away, then the most dominant female will actually reverse her sex and within 2 weeks will become a male. Marine reserves like the Poor Knights have so much to teach us, according to my dive buddy, author and photographer Wade Doak.
David, what people don't understand is that reef fish are territorial. And they think that if we catch all the fish out there in the open sea, then we've also caught all the fish in this bay. But it isn't like that. If you leave them alone in one bay, then you'll have a thriving population in that bay that just gets friendlier and friendlier the more people come to play with them.
So you're saying that if these bays were made in a reserve, soon it'd be like the Poor Knights?
Exactly, just like the Poor Knights. It'd be like an underwater zoo with no keepers. You don't have to feed them, you just come and play with them, and the more that you respond to them, the more they come to play with you. Little kids could be swimming around here, old people, the lot.
But how long would that take?
Oh, in about 4 years things will start to happen. The Poor Knights has proven itself to be a fantastic success now. It's about time we did some thinking. We should clone off it. We should have a whole lot of mini Poor Knights reserves, about 1 bay in 10 along the coastline. Could be a mini reserve, a place where the public could come and enjoy the pleasures of really getting to know reef fishes.
But don't you reckon the fishermen will get a bit cheesed off about losing what they think is their fishing ground?
They've got everything to gain. You see, the fishes that live here would reproduce and all the larval fishes would swim off and repopulate the areas where they fish. It's already been proven down at Lee Marine Reserve, where the fishermen now find that they're catching the spillover of the protected population in the reserve.
The Marine Reserve at Lee, not far from Auckland, is one of the few lifeboats on the mainland shore. And here there is living proof of the economic benefit of nature conservation. This is the crayfish or rock lobster, and it's a real delicacy. The cray fishermen have always gone for the biggest adults, but scientists here have found out that it's these large females that produce the vast majority of the eggs. Safe within the marine reserves, they seed the oceans with millions of baby crayfish. Reserves and commercial fish catches grow together. Meanwhile, back on the mainland, a relative of the crayfish has found its own lifeboat in a patch of gorse. More money is spent in New Zealand killing gorse than any other weed. Yet the poor old Department of Conservation have had to turn around and buy this patch and turn it into a nature reserve for the king of the creepy crawlies. And there it is, the giant weta of Mahoinui. And you can see it delayed by the curved ovid positive at the back there. Now, just sort of a flightless cricket, but one of the largest insects in the world. And the big legs, well, her ears are in there. Although it may look pretty nasty and aggressive, it isn't. It's a gentle creature, and that's why it's been wiped off from most of the face of New Zealand, mainly by rats eating it. If you're asking me why should a rat ever eat a thing like that, well, why do you eat crabs and lobsters? In fact, you keep on bumping into them all the time. They live in the gulls, they feed on the gulls, sitting up there munching away. And of course those prickly, spiny things give them the protection they need from the rats. And so, with all this gorse around here, I think she's heading for a long life. Off you go. The wetter may need its fortress of gorse, but right here there's a plant that needs a castle for survival. Here on Castle Hill, if you're lucky, you can see the rarest buttercup in the world. Unfortunately, I got here too late. The flowers have gone, but there are the fruits and seeds. And of course, that's the important thing, because they'll be able to go away and root themselves in rather strange, almost sugary, crumbly limestone. But since its discovery here, all over 100 years ago, it's been afforded all the protection there is. A fence has been put round and there have been punch-ups with local developers who wanted to take this stuff away and use it for agriculture. But now it's under the protection of a warden and the Department of Conservation. Even today, with all this protection, it isn't 100% safe. Stupid people come in and steal the things and take them to grow them in their garden. And that makes me really angry, because they're people that must understand about plants and know that they're destroying this, the Castle Hill buttercup's last island of survival. From a plant which has always been rare to a bird which was once so common across New Zealand that everyone could have had them singing in their own back garden. And perhaps one day they'll be able to do just that, thanks to an experiment taking place in Marpora. Marpora is an island, a 1,400-hectare island of forest set amid the sea of pasture, and yet the kōkako still sings on here, but in ever-decreasing numbers. A tough slog up the hill, but well worth it. Marvellous section of native bush. But I tell you, here we can see all the problems of looking after the ancient and rare species of Noah's Ark. Because in there are goats and there are possums and there are rats and cats and weasels and stoats, all vying with the very rare and endangered bird, the kōkako, for food and for habitat. So what are they to do? Well, in the old days, they'd have caught the birds and shipped them off to some offshore island. But the Department of Conservation have decided to take a firm stand and manage Marpora as an island of survival. The Department of Conservation decided once again to attempt the impossible. The island has been fenced and the goats and pigs are being dealt with. Possums are trapped all the year round, and stoats and rats are controlled by a concerted poisoning programme just before and during the breeding season of the bird, particularly the kōkako. These techniques are a very important step in preserving the old species on the Ark, so says Alan Saunders of DOC.
What we want to do here is show that we can actually conserve them on the mainland where they exist now, and that's really the way it should be.
But it is exciting, because put them on an island, it's like putting them in a zoo or an aviary.
Yes,
but
that's
here,
right.
You're actually saving them where they originated. And
That's right, that's right. This isn't a zoo at all, and this is the real thing, and that's the difference. The minute that you move birds, or any animal really, to an offshore island, and into a zoo, if you like, you're taking a gamble, and it's sort of really, in ecological terms, bucket chemistry, in that you don't really know how the birds are going to survive. You can take some reasonable guesses, but the best guess is, of course, that they're living here. They've been here for thousands of years. Why not leave them here?
Every time a species goes to the wall of extinction, it becomes more difficult not only to keep Noah's Ark afloat, but also to save the world. The whole world is dying. because we, in our struggle for survival, are destroying the very fabric of the natural systems that hold the world together. New Zealand is showing how we can put at least parts of it back into working order. The call of the Kokako on the mainland of Noah's Ark signals the end of the decades of destruction and the beginning of the years of reconstruction. New Zealand leads the way, a beacon of hope in the far south of the Pacific.